The hospital had stood silent for decades, a rotting monument to tragedy. Locals spoke of screams that still echoed through its broken corridors, of nurses who never left, and of doors that opened for no one. Most dismissed the stories as folklore, shadows of a forgotten fire. But one man, curious, reckless, or perhaps simply foolish, decided to test the legend. With only a flashlight and his camera, he stepped into the darkness. The air inside the hospital clung to him the moment he crossed the threshold. It was damp, almost suffocating, thick with the odors of mold, dust, and something metallic that reminded him of blood. His flashlight beam cut a narrow path through the pitch black, dust swirling in the light like tiny restless spirits. The doors groaned shut behind him with a reluctant thud. He turned, half expecting them to open again, but they sealed tight as though the building had swallowed him whole. He had always heard the stories whispered by the townsfolk, the fire that had spread in the East Wing, trapping patients in their beds, the frantic doctors who tried to save them but perished in smoke and flame, the cries that lingered long after the embers cooled. But seeing the place now, he realized the legends were not just tales to frighten children. They were warnings. The entrance hall stretched before him like a cavern. Peeling paint dangled from the ceiling in curled strips, water stains spreading like rot down the walls. Broken wheelchairs leaned at odd angles, and discarded hospital charts lay scattered across the floor. He bent to pick one up, brushing dust from its cover. The ink had faded, but the date at the top was unmistakable, April 13, 1993, the night of the fire. He froze, scanning the shadows. The hallway was empty. Yet, somewhere deep within the ruins, a faint sound stirred, the rhythmic squeak of wheels turning slowly, unevenly, as though someone were pushing a gurney through the halls. He swallowed hard, telling himself it was only the building shifting, perhaps metal scraping against metal as the wind moved things. Still, his grip on the flashlight tightened. He walked further. His footsteps echoed unnaturally, the sound bouncing back louder than it should, as though the building was answering him. Doors lined the hallway, each marked with rusting plaques, pediatrics, surgery, intensive care. Most were ajar, their rooms filled with broken beds, scattered syringes, glass crunching beneath his shoes. Then he saw it. On the cracked tiles ahead lay a patient bracelet. He crouched, picking it up carefully. His breath caught in his throat when he read the printed details. Name, blank. Admission date, today's date. His skin crawled. He let the bracelet slip from his fingers, watching it clatter to the ground. For a moment, he thought he heard faint whispers carried in the air, just beyond comprehension. Shaking off the unease, he moved forward, reminding himself why he had come. He wanted proof, video footage to show his friends, maybe even something to post online. Ghost stories went viral. And this place, with its grim past, was the perfect stage, but as he lifted his camera to film, the screen flickered. Static washed across the display before clearing. The feed showed the hallway, only it wasn't his point of view. It was him, standing there, flashlight raised, captured from an impossible angle far behind his shoulder. His stomach churned. He spun around, the flashlight beam slicing the air, but no one stood there. The hallway stretched empty, silent, except for the sound of his ragged breathing. He lowered the camera. It flickered again, shutting itself off, clearer this time. A woman's voice, soft but sharp, brushing against his ear. Come to room 13. His blood ran cold. He didn't know why, but his body stiffened, his feet dragging forward almost against his will. The sound seemed to pull him deeper into the hospital, down narrower, darker corridors where the air grew colder with each step. He tried to resist, muttering to himself that it was only his imagination. But the whisper grew more insistent, repeating, urging, until resistance felt useless. At the end of a long hallway, he saw it. A door darker than the rest, its paint scorched and blistered. Above it, the number 13 was barely visible, half burned away. But what made his skin crawl was the carving etched deep into the wood. A name. His own. He staggered back, his breath sharp in his chest. The letters were rough, jagged, as if scratched by fingernails. He had never been here before. No one knew he was coming tonight. Yet his name had been waiting for him. His hand shook as he reached for the door. The handle was cold, biting against his skin. The door resisted, swollen with age, but after a firm push it groaned open, revealing a darkness thicker than the halls behind him. Inside, the room bore the scars of fire. The walls were blackened with soot, the ceiling caved in at one corner. Medical charts littered the floor like fallen leaves, their edges singed, words barely legible. He bent to pick one up. The page trembled in his hands as his eyes scanned the top line. Patient name. Date of death. The paper slipped from his grasp, floating to the floor. His chest tightened. His mind screamed for him to leave, but his body remained frozen. Shadows stirred in the corners of the room. Figures emerged, faint at first, then solidifying in the flicker of his failing flashlight. Patients with burned, melted skin. Doctors with hollow eyes, their coats tattered and smeared with soot. Nurses whose faces were half gone, as if erased by fire. They moved closer, surrounding him in silence. Their mouths moved, but the words came as whispers in his head, hundreds of overlapping voices, chanting, calling, demanding. One stepped forward, its features charred beyond recognition, and reached for his wrist. Before he could recoil, something cold and metallic slipped against his skin. He looked down. A bracelet now circled his wrist, the same one he had seen earlier on the floor. Only this time, it glowed faintly in the darkness, pulsing like a heartbeat. The whispers grew louder. The figures pressed closer. His legs buckled, and he stumbled back against the wall. He wanted to scream, but no sound left his throat. The bracelet burned cold into his flesh. And in that moment, he understood the truth. The hospital hadn't forgotten him. It had been waiting. The figures pressed closer, their charred faces twisting in the flicker of his light. He stumbled sideways, his shoulder slamming into the wall. The air was so cold his breath poured out in misty clouds, each exhale trembling like smoke. He tried to wrench the bracelet from his wrist, but it held fast, as though fused to his skin. The glowing pulse quickened, syncing with his racing heart. A voice rose above the whispers, low, commanding, ancient. It vibrated through the walls, rattling the broken glass, "You were always ours." The flashlight sputtered and died, plunging him into darkness. Only the bracelet's faint glow remained, casting a sickly light on the faces surrounding him. He backed toward the door, fumbling for the handle, but it would not budge. The figures closed in, their hollow eyes burning with hunger. The soot-stained walls rippled like water, and in an instant he was standing in a hospital ward, not ruined, but alive as it must have been decades ago. The beds were filled with patients, some coughing, some wailing in pain. Nurses moved swiftly between them, but their faces were blurred, their forms indistinct, like half-finished sketches. He blinked, disoriented. The scent of antiseptic burned his nose. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Somewhere, a baby cried. "Doctor," a voice called. He turned, startled, but no one looked directly at him. A nurse rushed past, pushing a gurney with a limp figure atop it. The patient's head lolled to the side, burned and blistered. Smoke filled the air, alarms blaring in the distance. The fire. He was inside the night it happened. The walls trembled with the roar of flames. Ceiling tiles fell, scattering sparks across the floor. People screamed, patients trapped, nurses shouting for help. He stumbled backward, clutching his head as the chaos unfolded around him. And then he saw it, room 13, its door engulfed in flames. Nurses pounded on it from the outside, but it would not open. From within came the desperate pounding of fists, the muffled screams of those trapped inside. He staggered closer, unable to stop himself. The closer he came, the more the voices grew, merging with the whispers in his mind. They weren't begging for rescue. They were calling to him, "Join us, stay with us, forever." The floor buckled beneath him, and the vision shattered. He was back in the charred ruins of room 13, the figures still surrounding him. His heart thundered in his chest. "No," he whispered, finally finding his voice. "You're not real." The figures stilled. For a moment, silence fell. Then, laughter, dry, cracked, hollow, echoed voices mocked. "Then why are you wearing our mark?" The bracelet burned hotter, searing his skin. He cried out, clutching his wrist, but the pain only deepened. The walls began to close in, the shadows pressing tighter, the whispers growing until they were a deafening roar. He couldn't breathe. His vision blurred. Then, a hand, warm, human, grabbed his arm. He jerked, turning sharply. A man stood there, solid and alive, dressed in a doctor's coat. His face was worn but kind, though his eyes carried sorrow deeper than the grave. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said softly. His voice was clear, cutting through the cacophony. "This place doesn't let go." The man pressed something into his hand, a rusted key. "Find the records room," he whispered. "It's the only way out." And then, in a blink, the man was gone. The figures shrieked, recoiling as though the doctor's presence had burned them. The bracelet's glow dimmed. He staggered forward, clutching the key. Adrenaline surged. He pushed past the shadows, forcing himself into the hallway. The hospital moaned as though angry at his escape, the walls groaning, dust falling from the ceiling. He ran, his flashlight sputtering back to life in weak bursts. Corridors twisted in impossible ways, stretching longer than they should, doors shifting, staircases leading him back where he started. The hospital itself seemed alive, determined to keep him. Finally, he saw it, a heavy metal door marked records. The key trembled in his hand as he jammed it into the lock. With a groan, it turned. Inside, shelves loomed, stacked with thousands of patient files. The air was thick with dust, the silence suffocating. He moved between the shelves, the bracelet tugging at him like a magnet. His fingers brushed over files until one slipped free on its own, falling at his feet. He bent down, dread coiling in his stomach. Hands trembling, he opened it. Inside was his photograph, his birthdate, his life written in precise detail. But the final line made his blood run cold. Date of death, tonight. Cause, fire. Location, room 13. The file slipped from his grasp. The shelves shook violently, files spilling onto the floor like a flood of forgotten souls. Whispering voices rose all around him, shrill and desperate. He bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before he reached it. The room plunged into darkness, the only light the faint, pulsing glow of the bracelet. Then came the flames. They erupted from the shelves, orange tongues devouring the paper, smoke filling the room. He coughed, his lungs burning, eyes streaming tears. Shadows writhed in the fire, figures clawing toward him. Desperate, he hurled himself at the door, pounding with his fists, screaming. The heat seared his skin. The bracelet burned like molten iron. Just as his strength failed, the door burst open. He stumbled into the hallway, collapsing onto the cold tiles. The fire vanished, leaving only darkness behind him. He pushed himself up, gasping. The hospital was silent again, as if mocking his struggle. But the bracelet remained. And he understood. He hadn't escaped. Not truly. The hospital had marked him. Claimed him. Whether he left or not, it would follow. Somewhere in the distance, the whisper returned, soft and patient. Come back. Room 13 is waiting. When he finally staggered outside, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, relief washed through him. He had survived the night. But survival was not freedom. The bracelet still clung to his wrist, glowing faintly, impossible to remove. At night, the whispers haunted him, calling him back. He knew the truth now, no one ever truly left the hospital. It carried its victims with it, etched into its endless memory. And though he walked away that morning, he carried room 13 inside him forever, a doorway always waiting to reopen.